My father stood in court and declared I wasn't his biological son, claiming that was the reason he was removing me from his will. I didn't react. Instead, I reached into my coat and pulled out the envelope I had kept for 12 years. Inside was a letter from my mother and a DNA report. "You say I'm not your son," I said evenly. "Let's talk about that. Let's show them who truly doesn't belong here." My stepmother's face drained of color. My father's lawyer lowered his eyes. Suddenly, everyone in that courtroom wanted to know what I was carrying. They thought they could discard me quietly, but I had come prepared. They had called me a mistake. Today, they would remember me as the person who exposed the truth and ended their lies. I'm Jackson, and what you're about to hear isn't just another story. It's the moment I reclaimed everything they tried to wipe away or tell me where you're from. I love seeing how far these stories reach. Even the smallest connection can make a story feel understood. Thank you. Now here is what happened. If this story resonates with you, or if you believe no one should be silenced by their own family, please subscribe. Your support helps make stories like mine heard. The moment I walked into the Maricopa County Courthouse, the atmosphere shifted. People stared. Conversations rose and fell. I noticed faces from my past, family members, old business contacts, even a few journalists aiming their cameras like scavengers, waiting. That was who he had always been. For 30 years I lived in his home, yet it never felt like mine. He treated the family like a corporation. He was CEO, and I was an unconfirmed intern. The judge began calling witnesses. I was next. But before I could stand, Theo jumped to his feet, his voice echoing through the wood-paneled chamber. "I object," he announced. "This young man is not my biological son. Effective today, I am ending all financial support." He no longer represents the Harrington name. The room erupted, gasps, whispers, even the scrape of someone dropping a pen. Behind him, Vanessa stiffened. She tugged at his sleeve and whispered urgently. But he pulled away, eyes locked on the judge, as if he were presenting undeniable truth. Baby Milo started crying in her lap, a sharp cry cutting through the tension. I stood, not angry, not emotional. I simply smiled, not an arrogant smile, but the warm kind my mother used to say brightened a whole room, a smile born from certainty. From years of preparation, from knowing the truth I had carried alone, I walked to the podium like I had been waiting for this moment my entire life. "Thank you, Theo," I thought. "You just handed me the microphone." I placed my briefcase on the stand, resting my hand on the inner pocket where the sealed envelope waited. I had kept it hidden for 2 weeks, not because I doubted anything, but because timing mattered. If this day was about bloodlines, then I would bring the entire truth forward. The judge signaled for me to speak. I adjusted the microphone. Before I opened my mouth, my mind drifted, not by intention, but instinct, to the woman who shaped who I became, Eleanor. The mansion in Paradise Valley, where we lived, had never felt warm, except when she was there. She brought life to cold marble, creating comfort in a place Theo built like a monument rather than a home. She would read The Great Gatsby to me at night, her voice steady, her fingers brushing the pages like she had lived inside them. "Never let anyone make you feel unworthy of love," she whispered once after Theo ignored my science fair ribbon. When I was 12, she sat with me beneath the fig tree in the garden and told me gently that Theo wasn't my biological father. But to her, nothing changed. I was still hers, completely. At 26, I held her hand as cancer took its final toll. Her last breath was spent telling me I was her light. Theo didn't make it to the hospital. His assistant emailed legal documents instead. 6 months after she died, Vanessa arrived. She didn't enter the home. She overtook it. Tall, polished, distant. The first words she said to me were, "Oh, so this is the son," as though I were a misplaced object she intended to remove. Within weeks, everything shifted. Eleanor's cookies were replaced by luxury diffusers. Her reading chair vanished, replaced by a crystal display. Family photos disappeared, ours anyway, and were replaced with flawless portraits of Theo, Vanessa, and a perfect image of a life I was not part of. Theo followed her like a man under a spell, rewriting his legacy from zero. When Vanessa announced her pregnancy, Theo cried. I watched him hold her stomach and whisper, "This is our second chance to get it right." His words hit hard. In that moment, I understood. I had been a placeholder, an early draft awaiting replacement. Then Milo was born, a warm Tuesday in March. Curious eyes, copper hair like Wyatt's, though no one seemed to notice. Theo held him like a priceless find. I watched from behind a glass wall, invisible. 2 weeks later, I noticed Vanessa wearing Eleanor's emerald ring, the one Eleanor promised to give me. I confronted her. She said she found it in an old box. It didn't suit her. It never would. That night, standing alone in the hall, I found one of Eleanor's photos hidden behind a vase. Across from it hung their new family portrait, the official future, the version that erased me completely. But something in me did. It hardened. They could remove me from the walls, from the name, from their story. But they could never erase the truth. Not from me, and not from the courtroom. And with my hand on the envelope inside my briefcase, I knew Eleanor hadn't raised me to disappear. She raised me to speak. "State your name for the record," the judge said. "Jackson Harrington," I replied, my voice steady. Theo exhaled sharply, as if the name itself irritated him. I continued, "I'd like to address the claim made about my identity." Theo's lawyer shifted uncomfortably. Vanessa glanced back at me, tense and uneasy. "Your Honor," I said, reaching into my briefcase, "the statement that I am not Theodore Harrington's biological son is correct, but that fact has been known since I was 12. The courtroom murmured. I lifted the sealed envelope. My mother told me the truth herself. She left this letter and a DNA report for me. She wanted everything to be clear someday. Theo stiffened. Vanessa swallowed. I set the envelope on the podium. But this case isn't about biology. It's about a will. And about an agreement they refuse to acknowledge. Theo's attorney stood. "Your Honor, this is irrelevant." "It is relevant," I answered calmly. My mother and Theo both signed a testament, agreeing that I would inherit her personal estate, regardless of blood relation. I opened the envelope and pulled out the documents. My mother kept impeccable records. Her signature is here, and so is his. I pointed toward Theo without raising my voice. He knew I wasn't his biological son long before today. He is not challenging DNA. He is trying to overturn a promise he made. The judge motioned for the bailiff to retrieve the documents. He reviewed them carefully before passing them back. Theo leaned toward his lawyer, whispering urgently, but the lawyer's face fell. He had realized the contract was legitimate. In addition, I continued, my mother left a letter explaining her wishes. She wanted her to remain with me because she raised me, supported me, and trusted me. I held up the handwritten note, and she asked one thing, that her property, belongings, and personal assets never be absorbed into anyone else's name. Theo glanced at Vanessa, who shifted Milo in her arms, avoiding eye contact. I respected her wishes, I said, but after she passed, items of hers started disappearing. Some even reappeared on Vanessa's hand. A ripple of sound moved across the room. Vanessa tightened her grip on her purse, subtly covering her ring. My mother's will is legally binding, I said. The only question is whether Theo intends to uphold the agreement he signed with her. The judge raised an eyebrow. Mr. Harrington, Do you dispute the authenticity of your signature on this document? Theo hesitated. His jaw tightened. I need to review it. You've had 6 months to review it, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. But instead, you chose to announce that I wasn't your biological, as if that changed anything. The judge nodded slowly, assessing the room. This alters the direction of today's hearing. We will recess for 30 minutes. The gavel struck. Chairs scraped the floor. Conversations erupted instantly. As people began to move, Theo suddenly stepped toward me. For a moment, the confident posture he always held faded. His eyes were uncertain. You planned this, he muttered. I prepared for this, I corrected. There's a difference. Vanessa approached him, whispering sharply, We need to talk. Now. Theo ignored her. His attention stayed on me. You could have come to me privately. I did, I replied. More than once. You didn't listen. He exhaled slowly, frustrated, but cornered by facts he couldn't control. Vanessa tugged on his arm. Theo, we have to strategize. He finally stepped back. I turned and walked toward the hallway. Not to escape, but to breathe. I sat on a bench outside the courtroom. For the first time that day, I felt the weight lift slightly. Not because the situation was resolved, but because the truth was finally spoken. A truth I had carried alone for years. When the recess ended, the court doors opened again. As I stood, I felt calmer than when the morning began. Whatever came next, I wasn't walking into it invisible. I re-entered the courtroom, the sealed letter still in my hand. It was time to finish what my mother started. When the recess ended, everyone filed back into the courtroom. Theo returned with a tight expression, and Vanessa stayed close beside him, whispering instructions he didn't seem to hear. I moved toward my seat, steady but alert. My mother's documents rested on the table in front of me, neatly arranged the way she would have kept them. The judge entered. Court is back in session. Before we continue, I've reviewed the submitted materials. They appear authentic and consistent with Miss Harrington's estate records. Theo's lawyer cleared his throat. Your Honor, we request additional time to— No, the judge interrupted firmly. This case has already been delayed multiple times. We proceed today. Theo flinched slightly. The judge continued. I have questions for both parties. I folded my hands. Theo clasped his together, knuckles white. Mr. Harrington, the judge began, addressing Theo. Were you aware of the agreement between you and the late Miss Harrington concerning her estate? Theo hesitated. His lawyer nudged him. Yes, he finally replied. And did you sign this agreement willingly? Theo's jaw tightened. Yes. A low murmur swept the room. The judge turned toward me. And you, did your mother ever indicate she wished to amend this arrangement before her passing? No, Your Honor, I said. She reaffirmed it in writing the month before she died. I held up the final letter. She asked me to protect what she built. The judge looked toward her. Mrs. Harrington, do you have something to add? Vanessa stiffened. Your Honor, it feels unfair that everything goes to him when he isn't even. The judge raised a hand. Biology is not the determining factor here. A legally binding contract is. Vanessa closed her mouth, embarrassed. Furthermore, the judge continued, the court has reviewed evidence that certain personal belongings belonging to the late Miss Harrington were removed from her property without authorization. Theo shifted. Vanessa looked away. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Unless you can provide documentation proving permission, the court must assume the items were taken improperly. Vanessa tensed and lowered her gaze. The judge leaned forward. Here's the ruling. The room stilled. The estate agreement stands. All personal assets, property, and belongings of the late Miss Harrington are to be awarded to her son, Jackson Harrington. Effective immediately. Theo flinched. Vanessa blinked rapidly, stunned. The judge continued. Additionally, any items removed from the estate must be returned within 14 days. Vanessa's hand instinctively covered her ring again. Theo whispered sharply, "Vanessa, stop." But the judge wasn't finished. "Mr. Harrington," he said to me, "you have shown clear, consistent evidence and have honored your mother's wishes. This court upholds her documentation." My shoulders loosened, just slightly. Theo looked at me. Expression complicated. Anger, regret, and something like recognition all mixed together. The judge's gavel struck. Court is adjourned. Everything burst into movement again. Chairs scraping, voices rising. Theo approached first. "I never wanted it to come to this," he muttered. "I tried to avoid it," I replied calmly. "But you left me no choice." Vanessa stepped in front of him, face tight. "We're appealing." Theo didn't respond. He just looked at me, really looked at me, as if seeing the years between. "You look like her when you stand like that," he said quietly. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I gathered the documents and headed toward the exit, feeling the weight of the last few months finally lifting. Outside the courthouse, I inhaled deeply. The air felt clearer, the world quieter. My mother's letter rested in my pocket. Light, familiar, steady. For the first time since she passed, the future felt open again. Not perfect, not easy, but finally mine. The following days were quiet, almost too quiet. I returned home with the court's decision settled, but the aftermath came in waves. Some friends called to congratulate me. Others reached out with questions I didn't feel ready to answer. I spent the first evening walking through my mother's house. Her scent still lingered faintly in the hallways, mixed with old wood and sunlight. Every room carried memories I wasn't sure how to process yet. The next morning, Theo called. I hesitated before answering, unsure of his tone or in. When I picked up, he said my name softly, almost unsure. "Jackson." I waited. "I want to see the house, one last time." There was something defeated in his voice, but also something genuine. After a long pause, I said, "Tomorrow, noon." He agreed. The following day, he arrived alone. No Vanessa, no lawyer, just him, hands in his pockets, shoulders slightly slumped. He stepped inside, looking around quietly. "She kept everything, just the way it was," he murmured. I nodded. She liked things simple. We walked room to room. He touched the back of a chair she always used, the kitchen counter where she rolled out dough, the picture frames she polished every week. At one point, he stopped in the hallway lined with old photographs. He lingered on a picture of me at 15. Awkward smile, too long hair, wearing a sweater my mother knitted. "She loved that sweater," he said. "She made it because she said I was always cold," I replied. He gave a faint smile. "You were." We stood there a moment, quiet, but not uncomfortable. Finally, he said, "I'm sorry." I looked at him, unsure if he meant it. But he continued, "I shouldn't have tried to fight you. She trusted you, and I knew that. I just thought it would be easier to blame you than face what I lost." "What did you lose?" I asked softly. He didn't answer at first. He stared at the photograph as if searching for the words. "Your mother," he said finally. "She was the steady one, the one who kept me grounded. When she passed, everything felt like it was slipping away. For the first time, I saw not anger or resentment, but grief, raw and unfiltered. I didn't expect to feel He paused. I didn't expect to feel replaced. My chest tightened, not out of pity, but understanding. You weren't replaced, I said. You just didn't know how to let go. He nodded slowly. Maybe. We walked into the living room, where sunlight stretched across the carpet. Theo sat down on the couch, the same one and my mother used to argue on, laugh on, make plans on. He seemed smaller there, more human. I want to return everything, he said. Every ring, every necklace, everything Vanessa took. It's yours. It should have always been yours. His voice didn't shake. It remained steady, as if this decision had been building inside him for years. I appreciate that, I said quietly. He exhaled slowly. I won't fight the ruling. No appeals. No drama. I nodded. Thank you. He stood, glanced around once more, and said, She would have been proud of how you handled this. You showed more patience than I ever did. I didn't know how to respond, so I just gave a small, sincere nod. Theo stepped toward the doorway. Before leaving, he said, Take care of her home. I will. When he left, the house felt different. Lighter, somehow. Not because the conflict was over, but because something long unresolved had finally cleared. That night, I sat at the dining table with my mother's letter beside me. The house was still, the kind of quiet that settles after a storm. I unfolded the letter again. Her handwriting was steady, familiar. Love is a choice you make every day, she had written, and forgiveness is another. I read it twice, maybe 3 times. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe without pressure on my chest. The future remained uncertain, but it was no longer overshadowed by doubt or secrecy. It was mine now, fully and freely. In the days that followed, the house slowly shifted from a place of tension to one of quiet reflection. I spent hours sorting through boxes in the attic, carefully opening each one, reading labels written in my mother's careful handwriting. Some boxes held old holiday decorations. Others stored photo albums, birthday cards, and school projects she had kept for reasons I couldn't fully understand until now. Every item carried some piece of her intention. Nothing she saved was random. One evening, as the sun dipped low, I found a box I didn't recognize. Unlike the others, this one wasn't labeled. I opened it gently. Inside were letters wrapped with ribbon, all addressed to my mother in Theo's handwriting. Decades-old messages, some loving, some apologetic, some full of hopes they once shared. I sat on the floor and read through them one by one. Their relationship had been complicated, far more layered than I ever understood as a child. They had fought, reconciled, struggled, and held on in ways that made more sense now. In the final letter, Theo wrote, If I ever fail you again, remind me of who I was when you believed in me. I placed the letters back carefully. Later that night, Theo texted me, Thank you for letting me visit. I'm returning the ring tomorrow. True to his word, he arrived the next afternoon with a small velvet box. He handed it to me without ceremony. Inside was my mother's sapphire ring, the one I hadn't seen since before her passing. She wore this every anniversary. He said quietly, She would have wanted you to have it. I nodded. Thank you. He hesitated before stepping back. I know things won't go back to what they were. But I hope, one day, we can talk, not as opponents, but as people who loved the same woman. It wasn't a request for closeness, just an acknowledgement of shared history. We'll see, I replied softly. Not dismissive, not promising, just honest. After he left, I walked to the kitchen table and set the ring beside my mother's letter. The 2 items felt like pieces of a puzzle that were always meant to meet again. That night, I moved through the house slowly, room by room, turning off lights and touching small memories. Picture frames, quilt edges, the smooth back of a wooden chair. The house no longer felt like a battleground. It felt like a story, hers and mine. In the living room, I opened the windows to let in the evening air. I sat down and thought about everything that had happened. The humiliation at the dinner, the court hearing, the truth I finally spoke aloud, the conflict, the grief, the unexpected honesty from Theo. None of it changed the past, but it changed the way forward. I realized then that inheritance wasn't just legal documents or property. It was responsibility. The weight of carrying her memory, the effort to protect what she valued, and maybe when the time was right, the courage to forgive, not for others, but for myself. As I closed the windows and prepared to sleep, the house no longer echoed with old shadows. It felt full, settled, whole. For the first time since she left, I wasn't clinging to memories out of fear of losing her. I was holding on to them because they finally felt like home.